What's up, moviegoers? Welcome to the Marchio podcast. I'm your host, Anthony. In this episode of the Marchio podcast, I'm talking about A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. Now, this movie is a direct sequel to the third one, Dream Warriors. Basically, it tells the story of Freddy Krueger, who returns once again to terrorize the dreams of the remaining Dream Warriors children, as well as a young woman who may be able to defeat him for good. The movie was directed by Rennie Harlin and stars Robert Englund as Freddy Krueger. The movie was released August 19th, 1988, has a runtime of 83 minutes. The budget was $6.5 million, and it grossed $50 million at the box office. Now, I didn't like this movie at all. There were certain aspects of it that made this movie look like a comedy in a way to me because of the third movie, how good it was. The only thing that's wrong with this movie is that the whole storyline, don't continue it from the previous movie. Basically, the Dream Warriors is the first entry into this whole dream story. It's the Dream Warriors, then the fourth one, the Dream Master, and the fifth movie, the Dream Child, which closes out the story of this whole dream trilogy, which is what it is. That's what I'm going to call it. A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, 4, and 5 is called the Dream Trilogy. 1 and 2 stand on their own. That's it. I do commend the writers and the actors because the 1988 Writers Guild strike definitely, gave them a hard time and situation. It stated that some of the actors wrote their own dialogue. Some of the dream sequences were made up by director Rennie Harlin just to push the budget and just to, see what would happen. But then Rennie Harlin's known for that. He's known for pushing boundaries and he's known for not listening to the movie studio, which none of his movies are ever good, except certain, action movies that he's done. Other than that, he is not a horror director at all. And basically, Freddy Krueger, completes his revenge against the families who killed him. And, he uses Kristen Parker's best friend, Alice Johnson, to gain new access to new victims to kill. So Patricia Arquette was supposed to reprise her role as Kristen Parker from the third movie, but she couldn't do it because she wanted to, expand her acting career. I think if she did come back in this fourth movie, the movie would have been 100 times better, which is why the third movie worked. The third movie worked because you brought Heather Langenkamp back as Nancy Thompson, plus Wes Craven came back to write the movie to close out the series. So we thought, if you bring back certain characters in a movie and continue their story until one of the villains kill them off, then it's great, it's done well. That's the horror trope of things, and that's how it's done. And the character of Alice Johnson does continue on in The Dream Child, so it's very interesting to see and how things are done. The other problem I have with this movie is that it's categorized in the genre and subgenre of a fantasy slasher film. Where in the hell does this movie categorize as a fantasy movie? Where? To me, a fantasy movie is like, Peter Pan or Hook or any Disney thing that's out there. This is a fantasy slasher? Get the hell out of here. This is nowhere near a fantasy slasher. Or is it a fantasy? Maybe certain aspects of it are done, but no. Other than that, this movie is just not a fantasy at all. It's more so of a comedy, like I stated, and it's not that good. They tried, yeah. Even though this is the second movie in the Dream trilogy of the Nightmare on Elm Street series, this doesn't work. This doesn't work at all. Dream Warriors was fantastic. The Dream Master, interesting, different. And if you're wondering what the Dream Master is, it's basically a nursery rhyme that is called the Dream Master, which Alice uses against Freddy in order to face his own fears and reflections, which causes the souls within him to revolt against him and fight him. I do want to, backtrack a little bit. The only thing I do like in this movie is that there's a scene where it pays homage to the first movie where Johnny Depp's character Glenn is killed. One of the characters in this movie is laying on a waterbed, and Freddy jumps out of the waterbed and attempts to drown the character Joey and kill Joey. The way it's done is different. In the original, of course, we know how Johnny Depp's character Glenn died. And they tried to do that whole aspect, same thing with the waterbed. Of course, they made waterbeds scary after that, but, other than that, waterbeds were a big thing in the 1980s. So why not use Freddy Krueger coming out of one of them? The execution was good, but the delivery was a little bland. Not much can be said about A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. It's a difficult movie to watch and understand because you can definitely tell there are certain deleted scenes in it that were deleted. There's a lot of plot holes. And, people want director's cuts or theatrical cuts of how this movie should have been. Just leave it as it is. The Dream Warriors, A Nightmare on Elm Street 3, was fantastic, as I stated in the previous episode of the Marchio podcast. This one just doesn't do it. So let me know in the comment section below what you think about A Nightmare on Elm Street 4, The Dream Master. And did you like it, and did you enjoy it, and if you checked it out? And do you think that they should have stopped after the third movie? And let me know what you think about the questions I just asked in the comment section below. And be sure you tune into the next episode of the Marchio podcast, where I talk about the final entry in the Dream trilogy, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, The Dream Child. And be sure you click that subscribe button and hit that notification bell for new videos and new podcast episodes on the Marchio Productions YouTube page. And follow Marchio Productions on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. And follow me, Anthony, your host, on Instagram and Twitter at misterfilmstock. And follow the Marchio Podcast on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. I'll leave a link to all the social media accounts in the description box below. You can check it out and follow along. All right, everyone, that does it for today's episode. I'm your host, Anthony. Thanks for tuning in.
Wanna suck the face?